Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and so I'm in Carline earlier today, so I won't get too kicked out like yesterday. It was pretty funny, and I learned something really new today. And by the way, today's Friday. I'm doing this audio, so happy Friday, early Saturday for my Australian friends that I know. So anyway, I learned something really cool today that I'm sorry I didn't know before, but I didn't know that if you only put one earbud in, it will cause an echo for the person listening to you. So one of my awesome clients told me that today because she was, like, hey, you're echoing. What's the problem? And I said, oh, let's try this. Like, that's better. So I'm so happy I learned that. All right. So the title of this live stream, I guess, is going to be about planning ahead to get yourself really nourished and not feel so triggering. Because who among you, I'm raising both my hands if I could, kind of feels rebellious about the idea of planning your meals ahead. I know I do. Not so much to this day in the way I used to, but I still feel that a little bit because it just takes a little effort. And I don't always want to do it, but I still do. I have like this bare minimum I'll do with planning just to make sure that we do have food in the house and that it's relatively workable in some kind of way that everybody will like. So that's kind of my baseline of what I do. I get groceries on Thursdays usually, sometimes Fridays. So at the end of the week, these things are on my mind. So I thought it might be helpful for you to hear me talk it out and obviously provide your, I would love for you all to provide your input and your, suggestions of what works for you and what hasn't. So the word meal prep is one that probably makes a lot of you shudder to hear, let alone think about, because especially if you're kind of recovering like CrossFit or paleo kind of person or Whole30 kind of person or whatever you came from. I didn't call it meal prep back in the 90s when I was doing like the fitnessy kind of stuff, even though that's what they call it now. That's certainly what it was like everything was very planned and like every day of every meal was planned. And when I think about it in that way, it wasn't really emotionally or mentally nourishing at all. It was highly perfectionistic and it was all about avoiding fear of doing something wrong or not controlling my weight. So even though, food was taken care of, it didn't feel good. It just felt like a relief to not mess things up or be out of control. Of course, it always caused me to be out of control because I would always binge out of it depending on what was going on, either that same day or by the end of the week or whatever would happen. So we don't call this meal prep. But a client and I were trying to think about a way to call, like planning ahead, with your eating so you have enough groceries in the house, so you feel nourished, so you feel good, so you feel relief, and trying to come up with a better name for it. So my background was, and my mom would definitely plan ahead meals, meaning I could remember her like getting the meat out the thaw and whatever she was making, whether it was like baked chicken or meatloaf or whatever, and set it out. Sometimes she would peel potatoes even before. She'd do all this before work. And I had these memories of that feeling pretty comforting just because she was thinking ahead about like what we were going to eat, and so I knew there would be dinner and it wouldn't take hours to get on the table, and there was just like this little like relaxation in my body around that. So that's what we want to cultivate in us. It doesn't have to look like that, but it's more about first, what do you want to call it so it doesn't feel so reminiscent of being restrictive toward yourself, but also feels, bottom line, we have to be practical if we're going to. This is something for all human beings who want to eat food, is that we do need to be practical about bringing it in the house somehow. So for some of us at the beginning of this process, it might just mean you're thinking ahead about like how many times a week you're going to eat out and where you're going to get it and what's your budget and things like that. Sometimes it's going to be, I'm only going to cook once a week, and if I do cook, it's going to be easy, like everything's going to be a little pre-chopped for me, like the vegetables. The chicken's kind of already done. That can be your planning ahead, and that works perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be a certain way. But I do think there is a level of thinking ahead about how to get well fed and nourished that can feel comforting without it having to be obsessive. So I'm open. If anybody has any thoughts or things that work for you that are kind of rejecting the diet mentality way of planning ahead with your eating, but also do acknowledge the practicality of it feels good to have a meal that either you know you're going to get or that you know you can make and it's not so overwhelming, or you already have the ingredients, and it takes some of the chore-ness from wondering what to do out of this whole thing of getting yourself well fed. So for me, and I'll let y'all think about it, or maybe you might post later another day, but I'm posting this Friday because Friday here in the U.S., just because a lot of people get groceries Fridays or Saturdays or Sundays, and so I want you to be thinking ahead about that. So a couple things I do, a couple different ways I do things, and honestly, it all really depends on what's going on in life. So I got my groceries yesterday, and I haven't been thinking ahead very much about like what I'm going to cook, but we always have like a certain rotation of meals that we generally like, and I always get the baseline ingredients for that, and the baseline ingredients for most things like potatoes or salads or pastas and sauces. And I might not have a plan on going to make pasta on Wednesday, but I have it available for any day of the week that we might do that, let's say. And different kinds of sauces too, like a cream sauce or a red sauce or a pesto or whatever. So we have some options, and I get different options for proteins. So those are just some things that could be thinking about that you can keep on hand, that you always have, you can make something from. When I say we, my husband's really great at this too, at helping me, is coming up with like new ideas and new things. One of us will look it up, and we usually take turns making new things, or just planning at least once or twice in the week that we're going to make something new, and get the ingredients for that ahead of time too. So that takes a little planning, but literally, that they can take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long time. So I want us to really think about if we have any pushback against that. Look at why, and some of it could be just I'm too tired, I don't want to deal. Great, then be willing to make really simple things consistently, or eat out more, which is totally fine. If you go to a restaurant, order more, that way you have leftovers. That's a great way to do it too. I know a lot of us in our old meal preppy days would cook a whole bunch of food for the week, and that can be done too. But again, are you doing this in a way of providing for yourself, or are you doing this in a way of it being very kind of perfectionistic? And it will feel different, and that's why we want to do it in a way of like you looking at the context. So I've got an awesome comment here. Okay, so every weekend we come up with a plan for the week, not so much what we're going to do every day, but some options. And depending on how we feel, we pick from those. Usually leave open a day to eat we don't want to cook, or something just sounds good. I love that. That's such a good way to do it. That's really similar to the way that we do it at my house, and it feels pretty good. And know that you can also change your mind about that. So I think that's a really great way to do it. What I want to say to those are just like, that even feels hard. I don't want to look on the internet, look for new recipes. And I'll give you some ideas. The couple that I like right now are Delish.com, because it's not diety. I don't remember too much talk about like low calorie this or healthy that or all this other garbage. It's just pretty common stuff, and some other stuff that's not quite as common. It's not all that difficult. So the recipe, so that may be a fun place to start if you're looking for a place to go. I also like Cookie. I think it's Cookie and Kate. Some of her things are more time consuming, but again, there's not as much diet talk. It's really about just really nourishing food, and it talks about doing substitutions if you need to, like for different dairy or whatever. Like a lot of testing goes into a recipe, so I like that. If somebody has, I don't do a lot of substitutions, but if you need something like that legitimately, then it's a good place. And I know that she tests all her things a lot, so you're going to usually get a good outcome with what you make. I've made some cakes and stuff for relatives that needed some substitutions on eggs or things like that, and they turned out great. So anyway, those are some things to think about. And if, again, going back to if you're like, I don't want to deal, be willing, at least for a while, to put some more buffer in your food budget if all possible. Just because I'd rather see people, and I think long term this makes more sense, to spend a little more to get yourself really satisfied, to learn how to eat a big variety of food, to learn just how to put together a meal and it doesn't feel so overwhelming, that would really be really great. So hi people who are showing up a little later. I'm getting ready to finish up, so please please hop on later. I hope that you enjoyed that. But I would love people's, it's kind of like a little informal survey here of what are some ways that you've learned to turn thinking ahead about your food intake to get nourished. What do you call it now? Because meal prep is like a word we don't want to hear. Even planning ahead can feel a little bit, I don't want that. It just feels too controlled or restricted, can feel that way. For some of us, for me, planning ahead doesn't feel that way. But for some of us it does. So I think it's really important to find like a way and a language and a system that works for you. That way, eventually it won't feel, I think what happens is over time, some of the things that we used to avoid don't feel so difficult or triggering anymore because we actually like the benefit that comes from it, and we have figured out a way to do it that doesn't feel so all-consuming and so rigid. So I'm hoping this information helps you. I'd love to hear some ideas that people call it differently. These are kind of long things that I was thinking, like, planning for nourishment, planning for satisfaction, whatever, but that's a little bit maybe too long a phrase to call it. But anyway, just some things to think about. Like I said, we did a lot of tips today. Have a great weekend. I probably will hop on again sometime this weekend. I'm not sure what day. And so if you have anything that you would love me to be talking about, it could be anything around food, weight, body image, nervous system health, self-care, resources, whatever, let me know. Because I've got a whole list of things in my head, but if somebody has something really pressing that like, oh, please talk about this, then I'm on it. All right, you guys, thank you so much, and we will talk soon. Take care. Bye.